I was just trying to explain the fact that globally we have seen a number of jurisdictions coming up with a number of policy measures, and I mentioned the fact that the US have cut the Fed rate, the Bank of England have equally gone the same route, reduced the policy rate, and one unique thing about those markets is that the inflation rate, for example, is very low, almost tinkering on the negative side. Now, could the same policy measures apply in our environment? Maybe not, because of the fact that one of the possible impacts of the coronavirus in the market is the fact that there will be shortages, and therefore we'll start seeing pressures, inflation pressures, beginning to come in. And therefore, using the central bank rate to bring it down may not be quite the right policy response to that kind of problem. Now, the other option, of course, is, as you have mentioned, on the fiscal side,
yes,
trying to bring in tax breaks and all those options. But we also know of the fact that the National Treasury team is on a serious fiscal consolidation stance, where they're trying to address the fiscal deficit. And therefore, they're trying to reduce the expenditure, trying to look for additional opportunities for revenue enhancement. And therefore, in that kind of an environment, trying to come in with a fiscal stimulus, it's one of the possible responses, but they have got a very difficult, they're coming from a very difficult background to be able to achieve that. So I think as we look at the possible policy responses, we need to be aware of the fact that there are quite some difficult environment that they're operating from to be able to address some of those. Now, coming back to what you mentioned about the banks and how banks are going to respond to this. Of course, banks are also aware of the fact that there are two things. One is we are coming from an era where we had a very difficult environment of rate caps. And right now we are trying to move from that and take advantage of the environment to be able to increase our credit flow out to the market to support the economic pickup. And with the coronavirus coming in and therefore affecting the demand, I think we might see challenges of us being able to come out of that quickly. So we might see the delayed resumption of credit uptake. That's on one. Then the other one, which has also been alluded to, is the fact that a number of the borrowers look at the tourism sector, where obviously the projection in terms of performance may not be very good in view of what's happening to traveling. Manufacturers are already having challenges, and therefore we'll see the quality of our loan book beginning to exert pressure in terms of the non-performing portfolio. Now, with that in mind, I think banks will still be willing to support the borrowing community in terms of trying to support them within this period, just to get over the cliff. So I think the right approach would be to the specific entities that have been specifically affected, I think have early discussions with your bank to alert them to the fact that you might be foreseeing these kind of challenges, and therefore you are proposing some form of accommodation within this short period as the impact of the virus begins to impact your business, and with a clear plan of how you intend to accommodate yourself within this period when you've got those challenges. Yeah.
Right, Patrick, but how is this entirely going to affect also the realization of Big Four agenda, especially for the manufacturing sector?
I think the Big Four agenda is still on the trajectory of takeoff. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done to actually begin to sort of see that happening. And I think this is like, it's a short-term glitch in the overall picture of the Big Four agenda. All it will delay, it may delay the start, it may delay the pickup, but I don't think it's actually going to stop it. Because if you look at the agricultural sector, for example, what are the key inputs that you require in the agricultural sector? Fertilizers are the key things. Seeds, which are done locally, Fertilizers is probably the area of impact that you might have, because most fertilizers come from petrochemicals. But to say that, the petrochemical industry globally may actually see a flip up because of the reduction in the cost of crude. And that means that the cost of fertilizers, everything else is going to be cheaper. But then the challenges on the sort of the logistics may basically keep the price suppressed for a bit. So if you're talking about agriculture, I think it is all about people in Kenya, and it's all self-contained internally. So that should take off. There's no issue at all. manufacturing follows agriculture. Because if you're talking about the big four, that was actually going to follow on some of the inputs in the country. So it's actually part of a full value chain. So long as agriculture takes off, what will happen is that the idle capacity we have in the country will then pick up the production and move on. So what then happens now is if we can take advantage of the fact that globally the supply chains are not working and ramp up production in Kenya in terms of agriculture, use as much water as we can at the moment to sort of start doing irrigation, and then get it to the manufacturing sector, you will see that import substitution, which is one of the key things of the big four, will begin to happen. And I think that's a key thing. So right now we can take advantage of this virus and begin to implement the big four. I think it's the other way around. It's an opportunity, right? The others are healthcare, and healthcare basically is again an internal thing. We have to organize ourselves. The biggest impact on healthcare is going to be the issue of pharmaceuticals, because most of that comes from China, a lot of the pharmaceuticals. And so we may find that even once you try and improve healthcare, the curative side may suffer because of that. And again, we have local manufacturers of pharmaceuticals. The challenge is raw materials and the supply of raw materials. But that again, if with the depressed prices of fuel, of crude, which are going to play out for a bit longer, I think, than the impact of the coronavirus, because it's a multifaceted thing. The crude price is, we've seen the China OPEC, the Russia OPEC impact. But beyond that is basically the rest of the world versus the US in terms of fracking and shale. And that's sort of the geopolitics around that. And you're going to find that the rest of the world versus fracking in the US is going to play out a bit longer than the fight between Russia and OPEC. So, so in terms of the pharmaceuticals, if we get it right again and begin to manufacture locally, and wait for the stimulus of low cost of inputs that will probably play out with the low cost of crude, then again you're going to begin to implement the big four agenda using the coronavirus as a stimulus. I mean, it's almost like looking at it from the other side. But I think now that we are locked in as a country, it's a great opportunity to actually use, to sort of get the big four going. And the other thing I was going to talk about in terms of this lockdown, people are complaining about there's going to be people out of work and so forth and so on. Why don't we use what I call the idle population, if it does come up, to do other things, like clean up the cities? Or do something that normally we are too busy not to do, right? There are people available now, and if we think differently and begin to sort of look at the opportunities that this slowdown can give to the economy and to the country in terms of changing the culture, we could do a lot of things with the idle capacity of basically of the human capital that is going to come up, right? I mean, if Kenya Airways has gone down in terms of the number of flights they're doing, what are the pilots doing? Can we use them differently, not as Kenya Airways, but as Kenya, right? If manufacturing is slowing down in certain sectors, whatever, what can we do with that idle capacity? Can we turn that idle capacity of human resource into something different? I think we need to take advantage of this period that we're going to have of lockdown to do things differently in the country. And that might just begin to have a culture change in the way we think.
And so we have a twin challenge right now, as it is, you mentioning also the oil prices getting affected because of this tug of war between Russia and the Saudi Arabia as well. So there are bugbears and fears as well that the prices could even go as low as $20 a barrel. Is
that's going to happen. It's not as though it's whatever. It's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
I think that's like catching a falling knife.
Yeah.
With stock markets and oil prices. I think, however, Kenya is well positioned.
Is well positioned,
particularly with lower crude prices, being an importer of fuel. So, I think we should see opportunities there. Secondly, I agree with Patrick that how do we calibrate our economy to cushion ourselves from these external shocks, and what do we need to make our economy resilient and continue investment in manufacturing so that we serve not only our country but regional neighbors as well. So I think it is an opportunity, and we should do it. There will be some short-term impact on some markets which may shut down. So, for example, even I think non-food retail and so on in Italy is now being closed down. The issue is within Western Europe, which is a key export market for Kenya. If that continues, what's going to happen to our flowers and veg and so on? Although more and more people are going to eat in because because of social distancing, which is taking place now, it also presents an opportunity for our veg exports to increase. So there's, I believe we are well positioned. There will be some sectors which will have an issue, but overall in the medium term, I feel we'll be in a better place. Yeah.
Right. Some sector will